if I'm not stretching my comfort zone, I'm not really growing.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Behind Their Success podcast. This morning we have on Jon Gehring. Jon is a voiceover and audio production professional from Rochester, New York. He has a background as an on-air radio personality before venturing out to start his own business. Jon, welcome on Behind Their Success.
Hayden, thanks so much, man, for having me. This is a great opportunity. Loving this.
Yeah, man. I can already tell you're a radio guy. You got that silky smooth voice here. I really like that.
Well, when we came on, though, I have to admit that your voice and your microphone setup, I was drooling a little bit over that. And it's kind of competing with mine, which, a lot of people don't have that setup. So
Right.
Kudos to you, too, for setting that up.
Yeah, absolutely, Jon. Well, man, background in radio and stuff, you've been running the business for several years now. Tell me about some of those early days and some of the things you ran up against.
Man, well, there's the voiceover industry is somewhat a bigger industry than a lot of people think. In fact, there's a lot of content out there about how you can grow and scale your voiceover business. And of course, they make it look easy, right? So I thought, this is what I'll do. I'll talk for a living. And that's what I like to joke about that I do. I do get to talk for a living, and that's amazing. But what I didn't realize early on is that it's so much more than that. And this is the biggest lesson in business that I probably would say I've learned up to date, is that in business, you don't do your service and wait for people to come, at least not at first. That's where you want to get. But for some reason, I was thinking that, and so many other people I think who start in business think that too, is I'm a voiceover artist. Well, I'll just talk enough and be loud enough and people will come and buy.
People will beat down your door.
Right? I'm like, then I realized how much competition and how many voiceover artists, some of which are, recording on their iPhone in their bathroom, right? Not the ideal setup, but they're still calling themselves voiceover artists. So the very concept that encouraged me to start my business, that, if you want to be a business owner, you can be a business owner. That very concept also made it more difficult as the business went on, because I thought to myself, man, all these people don't know what they're doing, but they want to be a business owner. So they are a business owner. And that kind of frustrated me. So that's the biggest lesson that I learned early on. And that's what those early days were, is they were reading books about business. I wasn't even really honing my voiceover craft as much as I thought I would have to. Not that it's not important to continue practicing that craft and what you do. I mean, you might be the same way in taxes and accounting, all the things. Like, you thought it was all about the numbers, but at first it's just all about actually learning about how to do business.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's not even related to necessarily, like, you and I could have been at the same point, and we could have probably, been very valuable to each other as far as exchanging ideas, even though we're in totally different industries, because ultimately, when it comes down to it, voiceover, tax planning, whatever, business is business.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a hard transition. And the ones I see all the time, are just like operators, like, say, lawyers or doctors or accountants or whoever. I mean, they may work somewhere for somebody and they're great as an operator, and they're like, oh, hey, I can go do this on my own. And they can, but there's just a whole lot more to it, right? Like, being a great operator, being a great, say, doctor or lawyer or whatever, doesn't mean you know anything about running a business,
right?
And you get into that for the freedom and whatnot, and all the promises of running your own business, but then you quickly realize it's a totally different skill set than what you're used to, and the transition from an operator to a business owner is a lot more complicated than I think people think.
For sure. Yeah, I would say that sometimes those are the worst business owners, right? Especially the ones who think that they just have this great service that people are just going to flock to. And sometimes in voiceover and radio, I don't know if you could tell, if you've interacted with people in the industry, but there's a lot of ego that goes around in that industry, for sure. And I mean, it's acting, it's performance. There's a lot of big personalities and egos, and I think that can get in our way sometimes. And I'm definitely guilty of that too, because we think that we're the best. And why wouldn't somebody want to knock down our door for our product or service, right?
Yeah. And that's your typical, you say ego, that's your typical, I would say generally is the typical entrepreneur type personality that does have that higher confidence, that higher autonomy. I'm actually a little bit lower on that scale than most people would think or realize. in that confidence autonomy type scale. But that is the typical one. And that's where entrepreneurs, a lot of people get in trouble, is they run so fast, right? They run so fast and they don't realize that, hey, I got a whole lot of skills I got to learn, and I got to humble myself to be willing to read the books, listen to the podcast, and actually be willing to examine myself and make those shifts so I actually can build a real business.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's all about consuming that content that's going to make you better. And that humility, you mentioned it, Peyton, is essential, because if you think you know it all, you won't sit and listen to an hour-long podcast episode because you already know what's in it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that's, man, one of my favorite quotes from Mark Twain. I'm a Missouri guy. Mark Twain's a Missouri guy, but he's like, it's not the things you don't know that will hurt you. It's the things that you think you know that aren't true that'll really hurt you.
That's true.
It's being so confident in a wrong idea and then running into a brick wall that really is where you can make some major mistakes.
For sure.
So along your journey here, you've been a guy that's been willing to humble yourself and learn and write and learn from other experts. What would you say is your best skill, that you've learned and developed along the way that has helped you through this journey?
Well, ironically, as I'm the one talking, it's listening. I will say, that old adage of how you have two ears and one mouth, it couldn't be more true. And it might go back to that entrepreneur mindset we were talking about how we think that oftentimes entrepreneurs think that they're the ones who should be sharing ideas with the world and spreading their knowledge or wisdom or whatever. And then in voiceover, you're the one with the voice. Oftentimes, most of the time, 99% of the time, this podcast being the exception because your mic setup is awesome, but I usually sound more authoritative with my expensive mic setup. So again, this is a great exception of that. But oftentimes that kind of gets into my head too. And I think, well, I should be the one talking and sharing these ideas. But it's just simply not true. I know there's that famous book as well from a while back by Carnegie, in Winning Friends and Influencing People. And one of the biggest concepts in that, and every book or work since then, is listening. I mean, we've had almost 150 guests on our podcast, The Limitless Leadership Lounge, and every single one of them has mentioned the importance of listening. To some, it came easier than others. To guys like me who work in radio where it's a one-way conversation, right? Listening is hard. And ask my wife, listening is really, really hard for me, right? But I've found, and I've thankfully gotten better at that, there's still a long way to grow, that a good conversation is one, for me, where the other person has actually talked more, because maybe they felt safe in my presence to share some things that they wouldn't otherwise share. So I don't know about you, Peyton, but that's definitely the biggest thing that I've learned is be a better listener, and people will actually open up a lot more.
Yeah. And that's I've different executive coaches and friends and stuff and people that I network. That is a very common theme that we talk about. And I noticed when you filled out the pre-guest form, you talked about your superpower is curiosity. Yep. And I couldn't agree more, right? As in, as a guy that works in tax and wealth consulting and whatnot, that my best meetings are the ones where I don't really even talk at all. And I'm just sitting there every time, a client talks to me, and I'm sitting there with a great question to dig a little deeper, right? And it's my job is to ask as good a questions as possible and to talk as little as possible. And it would be amazing. You get to the end of that meetings, and I may talk 5% of the time, and they're like, wow, thank you for all that. And, and it's really, and it's like, I didn't really do anything other than being a sounding board to keep bouncing off of them so they could keep, actually thinking through the topic we are so they can understand it, right? And I'm just sitting here bouncing it back to them and letting them make the conclusions themselves, right?
Right. And it always feels better when we come to our own conclusions, right? I think we always believe ourselves more when we come to that conclusion rather than somebody tells us even that same right answer that we were going to get to anyway. We like it better when we got there on our own, right? Even though maybe you were a really important, influential part through your 5% of talking of me getting there. I think that's so important.
Yeah. And it's lay out the logic, and around money, there's so much emotion and whatnot. And it's trying to take some of that emotion out of it as the, unemotional third party here, in the meeting. Right. And it's just trying to drag that out and try to, yes, I know where I'm leading the client to make the best decision for themselves, right? But at the same time, I have to lead them to it. I can't do it for them.
Right.
Are you looking for a new tax experience? Looking for an advisor that actually brings you high-level ideas and proactively plans so you aren't overpaying your taxes? Or how about one that even just responds and communicates in a timely fashion? If any of that resonates with you, you probably just have a tax preparer and not a tax planner. And it is through the tax planning process where all the value is found. I'm Peyton Squires. I'm a CPA and owner of WR Tax Planner. We work alongside entrepreneurs and high-income earners, helping them pay the least amount of income taxes, both legally and ethically. We have saved our clients hundreds of thousands of dollars through specific strategies, and we guarantee we can find multiple tax saving strategies that your current tax preparer hasn't told you about. If that interests you, head on over to the contact page at PeytonSquires.com. There you can fill out a contact form and get a call booked to see what it would look like to have WR Tax Planners on your team.
So, on your journey here, Jon, tell me one of the best decisions you've made that has led to your success.
Best decisions would be investing in a couple of different softwares that I was hesitant to buy because, it's money, right? And that's always difficult. And for people like me, I have kind of a more frugal mindset in everyday life as well as
I'm an accountant, so
business. Yeah, right. You probably, you can resonate with that too.
Yeah.
But you don't want to invest in certain things. You don't want to invest in coaching. And I know there's good coaching, there's okay coaching, there's probably some bad coaching out there too, but in the right coach, investing in the right coach. Investing time into personal development. It's not just monetary. It's, can I take 2 hours of my day to have a call with an accountability partner? That's been a big thing, is accountability and investing that time and resources into that coaching and accountability. And that's one of those things that, it's the lifeblood of your business. It's what keeps you growing personally and in business. And you can be stagnant and be banging down on some door with the same hammer, with the same sharpness of blade, right? But if you sharpen that saw, which I know is one of the habits of highly effective people, I love that from Dr. Covey. If you sharpen that saw, it actually makes the work a lot easier. And sometimes it takes an upfront investment to do that, especially in business. That's why businesses often fail, I think, is because they're so concerned with the tools they have and trying to make it work with what they have that they're unwilling to go that extra mile, invest in whatever it is that they need, the best of the best, or invest in themselves with coaching or personal development materials to just grow their business to that next level and make it easier. Investments usually, when done right, are worth it in the long term.
Yeah, and that's 100% my experience. And at this point, I spend very significant money on personal development, coaching, network, mastermind. I've said this on the podcast before, but I spend more money on that kind of stuff than most people I know, right? And, I don't say that to brag or anything, but I say that as the commitment level that I am into this, right? And the time I spend, and, I travel 4 or 5 times a year just going to be in person with my group of accountability partners that are other, successful entrepreneurs, and we work on each other and hold each other accountable, right? And stuff like that. And yeah, I spend a lot of money doing that. It's so powerful to be in a room of people like that can get that deep and really just call you out and say, hey, this is not what you say you want.
Yeah, it is. Agreed.
So going back, kind of on the flip side of best decisions you made, Jon, tell me one of those big old mistakes that we learned from.
We're all going to make mistakes on the way in business, that's for sure. I would say my biggest mistake was having a mindset early on that the clients would come to me and that I wouldn't have to work for them. That was a mistake because that held me up for a while. I mean, I believe a mindset can be a mistake because it leads us down the wrong path. And having that mindset and thinking that, the longer I was in business, the more clients would find me, not if I'm not doing anything. How are they
going to magically find you?
It's the definition of insanity to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, right? And so that was a huge mistake early on, is not in kind of wasting those opportunities that came my way to network. I mean, I'd be invited to networking events and I'd just go, know what? This doesn't really have anything to do with my industry. There's probably not really any synergy here. But when it comes to voiceover audio production, podcast production, that kind of thing, we cross into so many different industries because a lot of people need advertising.
Work for anybody, really. Yeah.
Right. They need media. You do a podcast and you're not in radio, and you do a very good podcast too, and you're not in radio. So it's like, for some reason, being so pigeonholed into that one industry and thinking, and maybe it came from working in radio myself, where I thought, well, these radio stations, these radio people, they have to be my clients. They're the ones that are going to be outsourcing this work. But it's like, why not meet some new people? And it's amazing how many people know other people who know other people, right? There's this web of connections and being involved in that networking. So I've kind of taken that now to the opposite extreme, where I just network insanely. And usually it doesn't even lead to anything. And so what? It still feels good. It's rewarding. And when I least expect it to, it'll lead to something.
Something will fall in your lap. Yeah.
It's kind of funny where I've gone from that mindset of, well, this stuff is gonna, like you said, fall into my lap, and waiting for that didn't work. But now going out and doing things without expecting anything in return, that's when things start falling in your lap. You're like, oh, this is what I was hoping for all along. But I had to go through the realization that this isn't how it works. The world does not revolve around Jon Gehring. To realize that, as I still am somewhat young, hopefully, but I was a very young, naive entrepreneur. And now I think I've hopefully gotten through that terrible mistake of just waiting for the business to come to me, because that was, a very wasted opportunity for about a year.
Yeah. Yeah. And you say about a year, I did that for probably 5+ years.
It can happen.
So don't feel bad about your mistake. But you're right. Yeah. I mean, marketing is one key aspect of a business, right? And so many business owners, maybe they don't have the confidence or whatnot, and they don't want to put themselves out there. But you're right. It's networking with really no expectations, right? Mm-hmm. Networking with no expectations in return, just being a server, a helper, connected in your community or whatever type of community, but be involved in a community so people realize, hey, Jon's a good guy. I like Jon. He's a helper. If I can ever find a way to get him business or whatever, you know what? I will, right? Just because you're this consistent thing in their life, right? And that's what it's all about. And what it's all about is being top of mind, right, for people. I do podcast and social media stuff and whatnot, and most of my audience they don't need my services. But by me constantly being top of mind, they know when they spot a situation, well, Peyton comes to mind, right? Yes. Just because I'm just kind of constantly in your ear. Yes.
Yeah, quite literally too.
Yeah. So it's a struggle that everybody does for sure. And one that, the amazing thing is when I really started doing the stuff I needed to be doing, I look back and I'm like, how much time have I wasted?
Yeah.
You got to waste that time and learn the lessons before you can even do this. But it's hard not to look back and like, wow, I could have done all this 8 years ago.
Right. And it definitely feels like wasted time. But I like that you brought that up too, is that you do have to go through that. It's almost like you have to waste time. So is it really wasted time?
I love the term Alex Hormozy uses. If you ever listen to him,
yes, I do.
On the internet, but it's paying down ignorance debt, right? Yes. Everybody has to pay down this ignorance debt either through experience or money or whatever, right? And his whole thing is I want to pay that down as fast as possible. He says it costs me $1 million a year not to know how to make $1 million a year, right? And I want to pay down that debt as fast as possible.
Agreed. Yeah, I really like that you brought that up. That podcast, The Game, is worth a listen, at least worth checking out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, he came on my radar maybe 3+ years ago or whatnot, but you would have just talked about business content and execution. That guy is so articulate and thought through all those ideas so much. Entrepreneurs should definitely check out that guy.
Yeah, agreed, for sure.
So looking back, Jon, beginning of your business where you made that leap, if you could go back to the beginning, that day you started your business, what is one piece of advice you'd give yourself?
I would say quality over quantity is the number one thing in so many areas of life. So it's easy to look up YouTube videos and find all sorts of great advice about, and it's not even like bad advice, right? But like it is advice that maybe worked for that person,
Correct.
but isn't going to work for you. So like the big rabbit hole of, well, let me get on TikTok and try to find my audience on TikTok, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that may not age very well, depending on, the future.
Yeah, whatever plays out here, right? Yeah.
But like at the same time, I got so sucked into these little things that I heard online.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized that it was some nut job like me doing it. Like some guy who, sure, he was successful in business to a point, and that's great for him, but TikTok worked for him.
Yeah.
That does not mean TikTok is universally the way to find business development, right? So I think that was one of the biggest lessons early on, is just don't listen to any old fool. And I use fool lightly, like they aren't literally fools. They actually, it worked for them, but don't listen to just anybody tell you the formula to success, because your formula is going to be different. So my formula is quality over quantity on social media. That was the case because I got to be on all these platforms and posting like 3 times a day. And like, it's all more. This is the Gary V formula, which works for him. He's also got a team of like 30 people behind him.
Yeah. And he's just Hormozy, same thing. They just blast everything nonstop, right? Yeah.
Right. And so it works for them. But then I realized that I do not have the bandwidth to keep my business functioning and be on every single
like necessary, right?
Yeah. So I chose one social media platform, LinkedIn. And I said, you know what? I'm technically on all the others, but I'm active on LinkedIn. Yeah. And it's paid huge dividends. And it's been less mentally strenuous to just focus on one. And then that also, like, the Hormozy method, I do have a lot of respect for Hormozy, but oftentimes I think he can be a little aggressive as far as the way he wants to reach 100 people a day, and I just simply can't do that so do what works for you is, I guess, what I'm trying to say. That's the bottom line. And for me, 2 quality connections in one day is so much better than I used to do email blasts to absolutely no avail, right? Yeah. It's all for me quality over quantity. And I think that's something that may be different depending on the industry. Maybe in fast food, quantity is
volume,
huge.
Right? Yeah. And it's volume.
It's volume. It's a lower ticket item. But in something like my industry, your industry, where trust is so important, you're just not going to gain that trust with the quantity. It's going to have to be those quality conversations. So whether it's social media platform, whether it's connections that you try to make or networking groups that you try to join, I try to audit those things a lot more carefully now. So I'm focused on the quality more than the quantity.
Yeah, man, that's great advice. I'm on several platforms, but I'm personally only on Facebook. I have social media managers that post the content across several platforms, but really only lives on Facebook. And that's great advice, especially if you're getting into social media. It's like, just go own one platform. And once you, I know all these other shiny objects and other platforms are out there, but let's get one down. And once that's successful and running itself and not like this big strenuous thing, then maybe we can consider doing something else. It's just so much distraction. And you're right. I mean, same thing in my business. I've even made a major shift in the last 12 months of you talk about quality over quantity. I quantity wise had way too many clients. And it's making that shift to quality and making a shift of kind of the services I provide to where I can really, really help those quality people at a super high level and a much better offer. In certain businesses, I don't need a ton of reach on social media, right? Because I only need to find X number of clients, right? So it's really about reaching the right people instead of everybody.
Agreed. Yeah, it's interesting that you found Facebook to be effective for that too, which I'm sure it is. I've found.
I'm old enough. I 40 sneaking up on me pretty quick. So a lot of people like my age group and older, those are typically the people that have more of the money, right, or have already built businesses. And us old people live on Facebook, I'm afraid.
You know what? That's okay. That is all right. I think I might be at the cusp of that and getting into my late 20s now. I can see anybody like
in between thing there. Yeah. When I joined Facebook, that was really all there was. I mean, MySpace still exists. But...
Got it. Oh yeah. I vaguely remember that. Yeah, no,
I joined Facebook. It was only college students on it. Your mom wasn't on it. Yeah. Like you could
Wow.
only have college students on it. Like there was nobody else. You had to have a college email to get on Facebook.
That's right. Isn't it amazing how fast the social media landscape has grown? Because that was
Yeah.
not that long ago,
No,
right?
I
That's
mean, well, you
insane.
talk, at this point, it's coming up on 20 years. But
Sure.
it doesn't
Relatively.
seem like that long ago. Yeah, the funny thing is, Facebook used to just be this college thing, and everything on there was just like parties and drinking. And all the people my age before they graduated college had to go back to their Facebook and clean it all up as mom and grandma and everybody started joining
Yeah.
Facebook because it used to be a free-for-all on there.
That's funny.
Well, John, man, this has been a great conversation. Like, is there anything else you want to leave as a piece of advice for the listeners, or anything you'd like to share with them?
I would say if you're an entrepreneur and you're somebody getting started in business, don't be afraid to try some new things. Peyton, you talked about the ignorance debt. You
Yeah.
won't know until you try. Rabbit holes feel frustrating. They feel like a waste, but sometimes they can be the most valuable thing. And who knows, they might not always be a rabbit hole. A couple of semesters ago, I was recently offered an opportunity to teach a class at a college, at a local
Mhm.
college. I'm like, I've never like,
Me?
yeah, I don't have an ounce of teaching experience or
Yeah.
anything like that. And just nothing. Like, that is the furthest thing from me. Never even considered that. Considered that about as much as being an astronaut when I was a kid, for
Yeah.
like 2 seconds. But what ended up happening is I decided to take on the opportunity because I figured that if I'm not stretching my comfort zone, I'm not really growing. And talking to 50 19-year-olds about advertising and the audio and video production industry, that sounded intimidating, and it was, but now it's not. And that may not be like the most important life skill, but at the same time, it is a life skill.
Sharpening, man. Yeah.
Yeah, and it just goes to show me that I am capable of stepping outside of my comfort zone, and through reps and practice and just doing it, getting comfortable. And that will carry with me to anything I do in life. And now with that momentum, I'm looking for the next thing that's outside of my comfort zone. Right. So don't be afraid as an entrepreneur to grow yourself, to do something that you never thought you might do, but do it. I mean, don't sell your business and start a alpaca farm and, like, don't
Do
do
it
something
wisely, but yeah.
right. But at the same time, like, if you get an opportunity, don't automatically shut it down just because it's out of your comfort zone. And that's something that I've learned and really have tried to take on now and embrace, is this idea of, if you're not leaving your comfort zone, are you really growing? It's hard to say. So I now enjoy teaching to college students, something I never thought I would do, but it's just kind of a side thing that I get to do one afternoon every week and just enjoying it.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. And, I guess a common point there. I taught college for about 4 or 5 years.
Did you? Cool.
And same thing, it was early in my career where, like, it was my alma mater, small private school here in town. But like when they asked me to do it, I'm like, are you serious? Like, I was in this classroom like 3 years ago. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like, I'm like 4 years older than the students. But at the same time, it was one of the best things for me. Not that, sure, I made a little bit of money and it helped me, early in my career. But the best thing about it was just, it made me better at communicating. It forced me to like go in there and talk to people and to communicate and educate, because that's really the business I'm in anyway, is educating around finance and tax and everything. So all it did was sharpen my skills, and I did it for years, and eventually it didn't make sense anymore. And I probably held on to it longer than I should, but I let it go, and it served me well. But to your point, that's so great advice of, you got to step out of your comfort zone, because you don't know what you're missing and what, how rich some of these experiences can be for you.
Yeah. And don't they say that teaching something can help you even learn
It's
it
the
more?
best way to learn, right? Like, that's I'm trying to think of the medical thing. It's like you watch, like you watch one, you do one, and then you teach one. Right.
Yes.
Like, and the teaching is what allows you to really solidify in your own brain. Yeah.
Yeah. I found that to be true too. And I think that's part of creating content too, through a platform like this or any social media content. When you create that, you're actually reinforcing that and helping teach yourself and keep yourself updated in your industry by teaching that information to other people.
Yeah. And I tell you what, like, anytime I turn on my own podcast episodes, like I will get a message of me telling myself, like half this stuff I'm saying is stuff I'm talking to myself, not even the listeners. You know what I mean? And I'll turn on my own podcast and it'll just be a sentence from the guest or me. And I'm like, oh, well, that was timely. That was timely.
Funny how that works. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Jon, man, I appreciate you coming on here. What is the best way people can connect with you or get to know more about you and your business, or just follow you?
Sure. Yeah. JonathanGehring.com. And it's a mouthful, but Jonathan, JonathanGehring. That's my full first and last name, .com. That's where you can find more about me or sign up for my email newsletter, which is just a once monthly value content, hopefully, that you'll enjoy about, especially the worlds of audio production, how to improve your audio, your sound quality, your podcast, all of those kinds of things, or whatever audio or video projects that you're doing for your brand. That's what I send monthly in my email newsletter. And then you can also find me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm very active on social media. It's Jon Gehring, again, Goehring. So LinkedIn and JonathanGehring.com would be the two best places to learn about the voiceover services, and hopefully just I can provide some value to you if you want to learn more about the audio production world.
Yeah, that's awesome, Jon. Man, I appreciate you coming on and bringing lots of values for the listeners. Listeners, we will catch you next time.
Thank you, Peyton.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you found it valuable, please rate, review, and share it. That is the best way to help us build this and reach more people, as we're trying to accomplish our goal of help creating more healthy, wealthy, and wise entrepreneurs. You can follow us on social media by searching for me, Peyton Squires, or going to PeytonSquires.com. On the website and social media, we're always sharing tips of personal growth, and there we can actually interact. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, guys.